My junior coworker got a $42,000 retention bonus. I got $4,500. My wife's father told me to appreciate the gesture. That night, hackers attacked our systems at 3 a.m. I didn't say a word by morning, but before I get to that, I need you to understand something, because this story isn't really about a bonus. It's not about a cyber attack or a ransom payment or a company falling apart. It's about what happens when you spend years believing that the people above you see what you're worth. And then one Thursday evening, a single email strips all of that away and shows you exactly what they thought of you the whole time. I need you to understand who I was before that email arrived, because the version of me that read it, that sat at his desk in an empty office staring at a number that didn't make sense, had spent 7 years building something real. And you can't understand what it felt like to watch it get valued at $4,500 unless you understand what it took to build it. So let me take you back to the beginning. Part 1, how I got there. I was the kind of kid who took apart every piece of electronics in the house, not to break them, to understand them. Our first desktop computer was a second-hand machine, and by the time I was 12, I had it disassembled, understood, and reassembled faster than it had ever run before. My dad thought I'd ruined it. I'd made it better. That was the first time I understood I had a specific kind of mind, one that saw systems rather than surfaces, one that needed to know how things worked at the level underneath the level everyone else was looking at. I paid my own way through a state university studying computer science, working IT support for the university's administrative offices. 4 years of that, fixing professors' laptops, managing student email servers, building out network infrastructure when the school's vendor disappeared halfway through a project and someone needed to figure it out fast. By the time I graduated, I had more operational experience than most people twice my age, because I'd been thrown into situations that demanded it. I spent 3 years after that at a mid-level tech services firm, learning enterprise infrastructure the hard way, on the job, on deadline, with real consequences for real mistakes. I made some. I learned from everyone. That's when I met Garrett. My father-in-law, that's what I'll call him, was in his mid-50s, one of those people who fills a room without trying. He had built a financial services company from a regional operation into something that managed accounts for institutional clients across the country. Hundreds of employees, multiple offices, the kind of business where downtime was measured in dollars per minute. I met him at an industry mixer. He was describing a problem to someone, a data synchronization issue across distributed systems. He understood the business impact, but not the technical root cause. I listened for 90 seconds, then said, "That sounds like a timing conflict in your replication configuration. Latency issue between primary and secondary nodes. It's fixable in an afternoon if you know where to look." He turned and looked at me like I'd said something unexpected. We talked for 45 minutes. He asked questions. I answered them directly, without hedging, without performing. I just told him what I knew. By the end, he handed me his card and said, "Call my assistant Monday morning. I want you on my team." I called Monday morning. 3 weeks later, I was the newest member of his infrastructure team. Within 6 months, I had identified 7 significant vulnerabilities in their systems, resolved 5 of them, and written a 12-page report on the remaining 2, explaining exactly what would happen if they weren't addressed and exactly how to fix them. I met his daughter, I'll call her Simone, at the company barbecue that first year. She wasn't in tech, didn't care about systems architecture. She wanted to talk about something other than network protocols, and I hadn't done that in months. We talked for 3 hours. I drove home thinking about her. We were engaged 2 years later, married the year after that. At our wedding, Garrett gave a toast. He talked about loyalty, about integrity, about the kind of person who shows up and does the work without being asked, who doesn't cut corners, who treats their responsibilities as something sacred. He looked directly at me when he said, "This is the kind of man you want next to you when things go wrong, and things will always go wrong. The question is who's standing there when they do." I still think about that toast sometimes. I thought about it a lot on the night of the ransom payment. Part 2, 7 years. People use the phrase being essential at work the way they use team player. So often it stops meaning anything. So I want to be specific, because specific is the only way you'll understand what I'm describing. Christmas Eve, year 2. The payment processing system threw a cascading series of errors at 9 p.m. because a routine update shipped with a misconfigured dependency. The vendor was unreachable. It was Christmas Eve, and their on-call coverage didn't extend to holidays at that price tier. I drove 40 minutes on icy roads, isolated the conflict, rolled back the dependency, and had the system stable by 1:30 a.m. The company processed 4.2 million in transactions that night that would have otherwise failed. I got a thank you email from my manager. That was it. Year 3, the migration disaster. A third-party vendor botched a data migration and left 18 months of archived client records effectively unreadable. The vendor's project lead went quiet. I spent 11 consecutive days, not work days, consecutive days, 14 hours each, writing a custom reconciliation tool that rebuilt the indexing structure from raw data files. I recovered 94% of the records. The rest were gone. I wrote a full post-mortem explaining why and how to prevent a recurrence. It sat in someone's inbox for 6 months before anyone read it. I know because I followed up 3 times. Year 4, a primary database cluster went down at 7 11:15 a.m. on a Monday, with 3 major client audits scheduled that week. Failed storage controller. We had backups because I had designed and maintained the backup architecture. Recovery required understanding the system at a specific level. That was me. Backup in 4 hours and 11 minutes. The audits proceeded. The clients never knew anything had happened. Year 5 and 6, I trained 11 new hires. Walked them through architecture that had taken me years to master. Ran knowledge transfer sessions. Answered the same questions multiple times because that's what you do when you're developing someone. By year 7, 8 of those 11 people made more than I did. I didn't know that last part until the night the bonus emails arrived. Year 6 into year 7, I was also the unofficial security lead. No title change, no compensation adjustment. The previous security compliance person had left, and rather than backfill immediately, leadership asked if I could cover. I covered for 14 months. During that time, I ran quarterly vulnerability assessments, managed our external security auditors, and wrote 2 internal reports flagging specific weaknesses in our perimeter defense. Both reports were acknowledged. Neither was acted on. One of them identified the exact attack vector used on the night of the ransomware incident. Hold on to that. So when I say I was essential, I'm not describing a feeling. I'm describing a documented, demonstrable body of work that I had built over 7 years, and a set of systems that would break in specific, serious ways without me. That's not ego. That's fact. And it became a fact that everyone became very aware of the moment I stopped being available. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Part 3. The number. The email arrived Thursday at 6:52 p.m. Retention bonus, a confidential distribution notice. I opened it. 3 paragraphs. The first thanked me for my continued service. The second explained the company had completed its annual compensation review. The third contained a number, $4,500. I read it twice. Then the second paragraph again. Then the number again, $4,500. The feeling wasn't rage. It was closer to the kind of confusion you feel when something doesn't add up and your brain is still searching for the math error before it accepts the math is right. I sat there and tried to find the piece I was missing. Maybe this was partial. Maybe another email was coming. Maybe there was a mistake. Then I heard Derek. Derek had the cubicle next to mine. We were separated by a 5-foot partition, and the acoustics in our office were not good, something I knew because I had personally helped redesign the seating layout 2 years earlier. What I had not anticipated was a scenario where my coworker would receive news exciting enough that he stopped caring who could hear him. He was on his phone. "Babe, you are not going to believe this," he said. "I'm looking at it right now. $42,000. I know. We can do the condo. We can actually do the condo." I looked at my number. $4,500. Derek had been at the company for 14 months. I had hired him, interviewed him, identified him as someone with potential but significant technical gaps, and then spent the first 6 months of his tenure filling those gaps myself. I taught him the systems. I answered his messages at 10 p.m. when he was stuck on something. I walked him through every piece of architecture that I'd spent years mastering. 2 weeks before the bonus email, he had sent me a Slack message asking how to restart a basic service. Not something obscure. A fundamental function that anyone working in our environment should have memorized by their second month. I answered in 30 seconds without thinking twice. He got $42,000. I got $4,500. I didn't move for a long time. Then I started asking around, carefully, low-key check-ins. "Hey, did you get the bonus email? Weird timing, right?" People responded. Within 90 minutes, I had data points from 9 other colleagues. Lowest number, $23,000. Highest, $47,500 from someone who had joined 8 months ago. 9 people, all with less tenure than me, all with narrower responsibilities. Several of them people I had trained. Every single one of them had received between 5 and 10 times what I had received. I sat in the dark. I hadn't noticed the office lights shut off automatically, with nothing but the glow of my monitors. Then I called Garrett. He picked up on the 3rd ring. I could hear the sounds of his house in the background. Evening sounds. Settled sounds. "Is everything okay?" he said. "I got the bonus email," I said. A pause. "Okay. I need to understand the calculation." "It's late," he said. "Can this—" "I got $4,500, I said. "Derek got $42,000. He's been here 14 months. I hired him. I trained him. He sent me a message 2 weeks ago asking how to restart a service. I need to understand how that number was arrived at." Longer pause. "These decisions go through the compensation committee," Garrett said. "There's a process. There are factors that aren't always visible from your position." "What factors?" I said. "What factor makes a 14-month employee worth 9 times what I'm worth after 7 years?" Nathan. The way he said my name had a specific quality. Measured, slightly distancing. The boardroom voice rather than the father-in-law voice. "I understand the frustration, but you're looking at one number and drawing conclusions that don't reflect the full picture. The retention bonus isn't a measure of your overall value. It's a targeted tool to retain people," I said. "I know what it's for. What I'm asking is what it says that the company is so confident I'm going nowhere that they only need $4,500 to keep me. What does that communicate?" "I'm not going to discuss individual compensation decisions over the phone," he said. "Come to dinner Sunday. We can have a real conversation." "Garrett," I said, "I'm asking you a direct question, and I'm telling you to trust the process," he said. "The committee made these decisions with full visibility into the company's strategic needs. A Appreciate the gesture. Get some sleep. Come to dinner with a clearer head. Appreciate the gesture. I said goodnight and hung up. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes before I could drive home. Part 4. The weekend. Simone knew something was wrong before I said a word. She looked up when I came in and waited. She's always been like that. She doesn't ask. She waits until you're ready. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "I'm calling my father." "It's late," I said. "I don't care," she said. She called. She put it on speaker. The conversation was a compressed version of mine. Garrett was patient at first, then clipped, then clearly ready for it to end. He repeated what he'd told me. Trust the process. Full visibility. Careful deliberation. My frustration was understandable but misplaced. Simone said, "Dad, Nathan has kept that company running for 7 years. Can you tell him that's reflected in this number?" Garrett said, "Tell Nathan to appreciate the gesture and get some sleep. I'll see you both Sunday." He hung up. Simone set the phone down and looked at me. "He's never done that. Not once. Dismissed something that completely, that fast. He doesn't have an answer," I said. "Or he has one he doesn't want to say." I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark and thought about 7 years, about the Christmas Eve drive, about 11 engineers I'd trained, about every report filed and every fix made and every message answered at 10 p.m., because that's what you did when you cared about the work. I thought about the word gesture. A gesture, not a recognition. A gesture. Something you give someone so you can say you gave them something. Saturday morning, I read through my employment contract. The bonus language was fully discretionary. No formulas, no benchmarks, no appeal process. Nothing there that would help me. I already knew that, but I needed to confirm it. Then I started building a different kind of list. Every piece of critical infrastructure I maintained. Every custom process I'd built. Every place where my knowledge was the only thing standing between normal operations and a significant failure. The backup isolation protocol I designed in year 4. Manual, not automated, because I'd learned that automation in failure scenarios can create secondary failures. 11 specific steps in sequence. Steps 1 through 4 existed in the company wiki. The rest existed in my head. The vendor relationships. 3 external partners whose contracts the company relied on for surge capacity and specialized support. All 3 ran through me personally, not because it was in my job description, but because I'd built them through years of late-night crisis calls and detailed operational work. Those relationships wouldn't automatically transfer when I left. They'd need to be rebuilt. The custom scripts. Dozens of automation tools I'd written over 7 years. Log rotation, backup verification, alert filtering. Most not in any official repository. They lived on my work machine and on personal drives. The company's daily operations ran on them without anyone fully realizing it. By Saturday evening, I had 14 pages of notes. By Sunday morning, I had updated my resume for the first time in 4 years. Sunday dinner at Garrett and Patricia's house. Patricia is a good woman. Warm, careful, the kind of person who reads the temperature in a room and tries to adjust it. She'd made something elaborate. She greeted us at the door with brightness that didn't quite reach her eyes. 20 minutes of small talk. Then I said, "Garrett, can we talk about the bonuses?" He set down his glass. I expected that question. "Let me say my piece." "Please," I said. "The compensation committee reviews every team member annually," he said. "Performance reviews, market rates, strategic positioning, retention risk. They determined your bonus should be $4,500. I reviewed their recommendation and signed off on it. What did the retention risk assessment say about me?" I asked. "A beat. It assessed you as low risk for departure." Something about hearing that out loud, plainly, without apology, hit differently than I expected. Not like a punch, more like a door closing. "Because I've never threatened to leave," I said. "Because I've always just shown up." "In part, yes. So I've been penalized for being loyal." "That's not how I'd characterize it." "Then characterize it," I said. "Because from where I'm sitting, the people who've been here the least amount of time got the largest bonuses. The person who's been here 7 years, who holds the most institutional knowledge, who has the lowest assessed departure risk, got the least. The only variable that explains that distribution is that you trusted me to stay regardless. So you didn't invest in keeping me. You invested in keeping the people you were afraid might leave." Garrett was quiet. "That's a system that punishes reliability," I said. "You don't have to intend it. The math is the math." "Nathan," he said, and his tone shifted to something cooler and more deliberate. "I think you're letting emotion drive a conclusion that doesn't match the facts. Derek has attributes, energy, client-facing potential, a development trajectory we're actively investing in. He couldn't restart a service 2 weeks ago," I said. "He messaged me at 9:45 p.m. to ask how. That's the trajectory you're paying $42,000 for. Leadership isn't only about technical skill," Garrett said. "I've asked about leadership opportunities 3 times in 4 years," I said. Every conversation ended with some version of, "You're too valuable where you are," which I now understand means, "We need you in this role and we're not willing to move you out of it. So I'm too valuable to promote and not valuable enough to properly compensate. That's a very convenient position for the company." Garrett leaned forward. "Nathan, I'm going to be direct with you because I think that's what this moment calls for. You are a very good technician, reliable, knowledgeable, but there is a ceiling to how organizations invest in technical contributors versus strategic leaders. Derek and others at his level are are being positioned for leadership tracks. The investment reflects potential and trajectory. Your bonus reflects your current role and your market value within it. My market value, I said. Yes, at this company. That's what a retention bonus measures. Then maybe, I said, I should find out what my market value looks like somewhere else. The table went quiet. Garrett's expression didn't change dramatically, but something shifted behind his eyes. I'd be careful with that thinking, he said. The market isn't what you think it is. Walking away from stability and the relationships you have here over a number that hurt your ego would be a serious mistake. My ego, I said. I'm saying it plainly because I respect you. Don't let emotion make a decision your rational mind would regret. Simone stood up. We're leaving. We thanked Patricia, she hadn't done anything wrong, and walked out. In the car, Simone was quiet for a long time. Then she said, he's never talked to anyone like that. Not in front of me. He believes it, I said. He's not performing. He actually believes it. I know, she said. That's the hardest part. I drove home and made a decision. Not in anger. The anger had burned through by the time we reached the driveway, and what was underneath was quieter and more certain. I wasn't going to fight. I wasn't going to beg or threaten or request another conversation about market value. I was going to leave on my own timeline, in my own way, without giving anyone the chance to manage the situation before I was already gone. Part 5. The inventory. Monday morning, I arrived at 7 a.m. The building was empty. I made coffee, sat at my desk, and started the most thorough documentation project of my career, not to help the company. I want to be clear about that. I was doing it for myself because I needed to understand, with complete precision, what I was walking away from and what they would lose when I went. I needed the number in my head to match reality. I started with the backup architecture. I had designed it in year 3 after the hardware failure. The existing system at the time was functional and about 60% of what we actually needed. I rebuilt it from scratch over 4 months, working nights and weekends because the project wasn't officially scoped and there was no overtime budget. I built in redundancies the original didn't have. The most important element was the isolation procedure. 11 steps, specific and sequential, non-negotiable. Execute them out of order and the result was unpredictable and potentially irreversible. Steps 1 through 4 were in the wiki. The rest were in my head. I had told myself I would finish the documentation when things slowed down. Things never slowed down. And now, sitting at my desk on a Monday morning with 2 weeks left before I walked out, I was looking at that partial write-up with a very specific kind of clarity. I did not complete it. I want to say that plainly because I want you to understand exactly what I did and didn't do. I didn't destroy anything. I didn't alter any systems. I didn't take anything that legally belonged to the company. What I did was make a decision not to donate the contents of my head to a company that had told me clearly what those contents were worth. The knowledge of that protocol was mine. The 7 years it took to build it were mine. And there was no clause in my contract and no ethic I subscribed to that required me to hand over my expertise to people who had valued it at $4,500. Then I went to work on my resume, sent it to 8 companies that evening. By Tuesday afternoon, I had 4 responses. By Wednesday morning, I had 3 phone screens scheduled. Those calls were the moment when the abstract sense that I'd been undervalued became externally verified fact. The first company, their opening range was $130,000 to $155,000. I was making $89,000. The second, their infrastructure lead asked me 3 deeply technical questions, the kind that separate people who understand systems from people who've memorized answers about systems. I answered all 3 in detail from experience. He stopped me at the end of the third and said, I don't think we need to continue the screening. I'd like to move you directly to the technical interview. The third, a direct competitor. Their CTO and I spoke for over an hour. By the end, he'd sketched out a senior role with actual authority, actual budget, and actual team reporting to me, and then mentioned a number almost as an afterthought. $145,000 to start, with a $20,000 signing bonus and equity participation in the next round. The signing bonus alone was 4 times my retention bonus. I drove home Wednesday evening not feeling rage or vindication, something quieter. The feeling of someone who has been in a room with not enough oxygen and has finally stepped outside. I had always known what I was worth, but now I had 3 companies telling me the same thing with numbers attached, and that changed something in how I was carrying all of it. I didn't say a word to anyone at the company, not to my manager, not to Derek, not to Garrett. I just kept showing up, kept answering messages, kept helping Derek when he needed it, kept being exactly what they'd always expected me to be. It was the longest 2 weeks of my career. I accepted an offer on the Friday of that second week. The first company had come back with $152,000, a $22,000 signing bonus, full benefits, equity, and a title that read Senior Director of Infrastructure. Start date, Monday of the following week. I had not given notice. I had made a conscious choice about this. Garrett had told me I was a technician who needed to know his limitations. He had told me that men like Derek had vision. He had told me to appreciate a gesture that communicated, numerically and clearly, exactly what he thought 7 years of my life was worth. I had taken him at his word. Thursday of that final week, I stayed late. Not unusually late. I often worked past 8 or 9. I moved personal files onto encrypted drives. I cleared my personal email from the work machine. I collected the small physical items from my desk, a conference mug, a notebook, a charger. I backed up contact information for every vendor and industry connection I'd built over 7 years. I was methodical. I was not reckless. I did not touch anything that belonged to the company. I was just getting ready to go. Part 6, 3 a.m. It was 10:09 p.m. when my phone rang. Security Operations Center. The night shift lead, I'll call him Marcus. His voice was the voice of someone trying to stay calm and losing the fight. Hey, we have something bad happening. What kind of bad? I asked. Ransomware active right now, moving through the network faster than anything I've seen. It's into the client databases, transaction records. The backup systems are showing alerts I've never seen before. Nathan, I don't know what to do here. I sat very still. How long has it been running? We caught it about 20 minutes ago. Ransom note popped up on 3 terminals simultaneously. They want Bitcoin. There's a timer. If we don't respond in, he checked something. 58 minutes, they start permanently deleting files. I knew exactly what this was. 4 months earlier, I had written a report identifying a specific vulnerability in our perimeter defense, a weakness in how our external-facing authentication was configured. I had documented the attack vector precisely. I had recommended remediation steps. The report was acknowledged. The remediation was never implemented. Someone had found the door I'd identified and walked through it, and I knew exactly how to close it. The isolation protocol, 11 steps, manual by design, never fully documented, would contain the attack if executed correctly. It would protect the backup stores. It would mean that whatever the attackers had accessed could be recovered from without catastrophic data loss. Without that protocol, run correctly, in sequence by someone who understood it, the backups themselves were at risk. And if the backups were compromised, there was no clean recovery point. There was only whatever the attackers decided to leave behind. Marcus was talking, explaining what he'd already tried. I looked at the clock. 10:13 p.m. I looked at my bag, sitting beside the desk, packed with 7 years of personal items, ready to carry out to my car. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Garrett. Heard we have a situation. Counting on you to handle it. You're the best we have. I stared at that message. You're the best we have. $4,500. I thought about the report sitting in someone's inbox for 4 months, the vulnerability it identified, the remediation that never happened. I thought about the dinner table, about just a technician, about men like Derek have vision, about the wedding toast, about loyalty and integrity, and being the person you want next to you when things go wrong. I thought about $42,000. Then I said to Marcus, call Derek. It's his rotation tonight. Check the on-call schedule. He received a significant retention investment. Give him the opportunity to deliver on it. Silence. Nathan, Marcus said carefully. Derek cannot handle this. You know that. You don't know that until you try, I said. There are 54 minutes on this timer. Then call Derek, I said. And if that doesn't resolve it, call Garrett. He's the COO. This is exactly the kind of strategic crisis the company has been investing in leadership to handle. Let them handle it. A long silence. Are you serious? Marcus said. I'm not on call tonight, I said. Check the schedule. I hung up. I sat at my desk for a moment. The office was completely quiet. Somewhere in the building, servers were being encrypted, one after another. A systematic attack moving through infrastructure I had spent 7 years building and protecting. Infrastructure that, had one of my 2 security reports been acted on, would not have been vulnerable to this attack. I picked up my bag. I turned off my monitors. I walked out. The drive home took 16 minutes. Missed calls stacked up the whole way. Marcus, my manager. Marcus again. Someone from the executive team. Garrett. Garrett again. By the time I pulled into the driveway, there were 9 missed calls. Simone was awake when I came in. She looked at my face, then at my bag, and understood immediately. There's a crisis at work, she said. Not a question. Yes, I said. My father called me. He said they can't reach you. They reached me, I said. I chose not to respond. She was quiet for a moment. What happened? I told her everything. The ransomware. Marcus's call. Garrett's text. The protocol that existed in my head, and the partial wiki that wasn't enough. The decision I'd made at my desk with a packed bag at my feet. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, how bad is it? If they can't run the isolation protocol, and they can't because it's not documented and no one else has ever done it, the backups get compromised, which means the ransom is probably their only option. How much? She asked. The note said $1.8 million. Another silence. Garrett told me to know my limitations, I said. He told me I was a technician, that Derek and people like him had vision and saw the big picture. I'm just taking his word for it. This is a strategic crisis. It needs strategic leadership. Let the strategic leadership handle it. Simone looked at me for a long time. Then she said quietly, okay, just that. My phone kept lighting up through the night. At some point, I silenced it and watched the call log fill. Garrett called 11 times times before midnight. After that, it was a mix of numbers I recognized and numbers I didn't. Executives, managers, people working through every contact they had. At 2:17 a.m., Marcus texted my personal number. They paid it. $1.8 million, backups are gone. Derek couldn't do it. Nobody could. I'm sorry, Nathan. I don't know what else to say. I read the message, put the phone down, went to sleep. Part 7. The Fallout. I woke up to 26 missed calls and 31 text messages. The first wave, midnight to 2 a.m., were urgent and pleading. Where are you? We need you. Please call back. The second wave, after the ransom was paid, had a different quality. Shock, anger. One from an executive I'd barely spoken to in 2 years that said only, "Call me immediately." Garrett had called 7 times total. His 6th call was the first voicemail. Composed, careful, the voice of someone who had collected himself before recording. He said he hoped I was all right, that the company had experienced a significant incident, that when I was available, he would like to speak with me. He didn't say anything about $4,500. He didn't say anything about the dinner table. I didn't call back. I sent one email to my direct manager. It said, "I'm resigning effective immediately. Please treat this as my formal notice. I've accepted a position elsewhere with a Monday start date. I'll coordinate with HR on any outstanding matters." Then I blocked the company's main number, then Garrett's cell, then his work line. At 9 a.m., Marcus emailed my personal account from his personal address. He told me they'd lost 3 years of client transaction records, that the restored backup from the attackers was about 30% corrupted or missing, that 4 client calls had already come in that morning asking questions nobody could answer, that the board was meeting that afternoon, that Garrett was in a very bad place. He said, "I'm not calling this your fault. You had every right to do what you did. I just wanted you to have the full picture. I'm sorry for whatever part I played in how things got to where they were." I replied to Marcus, thanked him, told him none of this was on him and that he'd been a good colleague, told him if he ever needed a reference or wanted to make a move, I'd help. I didn't reply to anyone else. At noon, Garrett showed up at the house. I heard the car and knew from the way he knocked, 3 hard raps, no pause, that this wasn't going to be quiet. Simone was upstairs. I opened the door. He looked like he'd aged 5 years since Sunday. Tie loose, expensive shirt wrinkled in the way that tells you someone has been wearing it for far too many hours. Eyes sharp, but surrounded by shadow. "Nathan," he said. "Garrett," I said. "We need to talk." I stepped back. He came in. We stood in the entryway. "Do you understand what happened last night?" he said. "I have a clear picture," I said. $1.8 million, significant client data loss, clients threatening to leave. The board is meeting today and my position may not survive it. He held my gaze. "I need to know if you understand your role in that. I need you to understand something first," I said. 4 months ago, I filed a report identifying the exact vulnerability that was used last night. I documented the attack vector. I recommended specific remediation. The report was acknowledged. Nothing was done. The attack happened because decisions made above me created and maintained the conditions that made it possible. Last night's ransom was not caused by a cyber attack. It was caused by a pattern of decisions. The cyber attack just sent the invoice. He didn't flinch. "You still had the ability to stop it." "Yes," I said. "I did. And you chose not to." "I chose to operate at the value the company assigned to me," I said. "You told me I was a technician who needed to know his limitations. You said the strategic decisions, who to invest in, what to protect, how to value people, those belonged to the leadership track, Derek's track. So when a strategic crisis arrived, I stepped back and let the leadership track handle it. I'm just the technician." His jaw tightened. "That's not a defense," he said. "You had knowledge no one else had. You had the ability to prevent a catastrophic loss and you walked away. And you had the ability to properly value the person holding that knowledge," I said. "You had the ability to act on my security report 4 months ago. You had the ability to look me in the eye at that dinner table and acknowledge that 7 years of what I'd built was worth more than a gesture. You had all of those abilities. You made different choices. So did I." Garrett was silent. "Is there anything else?" I said. "This isn't over," he said quietly. The certain voice, the voice of a man deciding something. "I want you to know that." "Garrett," I said, "you have a company that just paid $1.8 million because it didn't properly value its infrastructure. You have a board meeting today about whether you survive it. You have client relationships wobbling because they've lost confidence in your systems, and you're in my entryway telling me it isn't over." I held the door open. He left without another word. Simone came down the stairs and stood at the bottom. She'd heard enough. "Monday?" I said. "Monday," she said. Part 8, what $4,500 actually cost them. I started at the new company Monday morning. Their head of infrastructure met me in the lobby with a welcome folder that included my signing bonus information, benefits summary, and a 12-month development plan with specific milestones. He said, "We've been hoping you'd make this move. Glad you finally did." Within 2 weeks, I had a full audit of their infrastructure completed and a prioritized remediation plan in front of the CTO. He read it in one sitting and approved the budget the same afternoon. That had never happened to me before. Not once in 7 years. The experience of saying, "Here is the problem, here is what we need," and hearing, "Yes, let's do it." I hadn't realized how much energy I'd been spending for years fighting the friction of the opposite. How much of my capacity had gone not into solving problems, but into justifying why the problems existed and why solving them mattered. Word traveled through the industry about what had happened at my former company. Not because I said anything, I never discussed the specifics publicly, but significant ransomware attacks at financial services firms don't stay quiet. A $1.8 million ransom payment, significant data loss. A COO departure framed as retirement that didn't take anyone long to contextualize. The story assembled itself from public information and professional networks and the natural motion of people who knew people. 3 months after I left, Marcus reached out again. He'd taken a position at a smaller firm, lateral in title, significantly better in every other respect. He told me Derek had been let go. Without me to catch and correct his work, his actual skill level had become visible quickly. A series of escalating incidents had made the decision easy. He told me the client losses were continuing. He told me Garrett's retirement had been announced and that most people understood it wasn't voluntary. He also told me that 2 of the 3 major vendors whose relationships had run through me personally had declined to renew their contracts when they came up. The new terms the company negotiated with replacement vendors were significantly less favorable. 6 months after I left, I was promoted to senior director. My team grew from 4 engineers to 11. My total annual compensation, base, bonus, equity, was more than 3 times what I'd been making at my previous company. At my 1-year review, the CTO said something I've thought about since. He said, "The thing I notice about you is that you're never surprised when something goes wrong. You're always ready, like you've been expecting it." "Why is that?" I said. "Because I spent 7 years in a place where if anything went wrong, the answer was always going to be me, so I learned to stay ready." He nodded like that made complete sense. It does. It makes complete sense to anyone who has ever been the invisible load bearer, the person a company relies on without ever formally acknowledging that reliance, the one whose value only becomes visible when it's gone. $4,500. That's what 7 years of that was worth. That's the number Garrett signed off on. That's what the compensation committee, with full visibility into strategic needs and individual performance profiles, decided was the appropriate gesture for the person who held the institutional knowledge that, when withdrawn, cost them $1.8 million in a single night. I don't think about it with anger anymore. I think about it the way you think about a lesson that had to arrive in a form impossible to ignore before it finally landed. Here's what I learned. Loyalty is not a virtue that organizations reward. It is a condition they exploit, gently without malice, for as long as you allow them to. The moment you stop being loyal is the moment they discover what your loyalty was worth. And if they are the kind of organization that Garrett ran, they discover it at 3 a.m. with a ransomware timer counting down, on the night the technician has finally, permanently, decided to know his limitations. I never went back. I never had a closing conversation with Garrett. He sent an email 3 weeks after the board meeting. It sat in my inbox unopened before I eventually deleted it. I didn't need his acknowledgement. The clarity had arrived already. On the night I stared at his text message, "You're the best we have," and weighed it against a dinner table where he'd told me I was just a technician who needed to know his place. Simone asked me once, late into my first year at the new job, whether I felt bad about how things ended, about the clients who'd been hurt, about Derek, who'd been set up to fail by a company that valued his potential over my results. I thought about it honestly. I feel bad that people who had nothing to do with these decisions got hurt, I said. The clients who lost data didn't deserve that. Marcus didn't deserve to be in that situation. Those things are real and they matter. And the company, she said. The $1.8 million was the price tag on years of decisions, I said. They chose to underpay. They chose to ignore 2 security reports. They chose to build an operation structurally dependent on one person's knowledge while treating that person like a replaceable part. The ransom wasn't the cost of a cyber attack. It was the cost of their management philosophy, invoiced all at once. Simone was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My father told you to appreciate the gesture." "He did," I said. She looked at me. "I hope it was worth it to him," she said. "It wasn't, but walking away was."